Hello and welcome to the Lib Dem Podcast. My name is John Potter. I am the leader of the Preston Liberal Democrats, and joining me on this episode where we're going to talk from everything from the Russian invasion of Ukraine right the way to council budgets, and we've even thought of a way we can even segue them together. But joining me, our podcast host, founder, and the overall grandee of the podcast is Richard Kemp, the leader of the Liverpool Lib Dems. Hi, Richard.
Hello, nice to be on again.
So, Richard, last week we obviously had a wonderful interview with Kira Ruddick, the Ukrainian MP came on, very moving, and obviously we discussed at length about what this means. Since that time, there's been a lot of revelations about how poor the UK is doing in terms of refugees, which obviously has been highlighted a lot, but also about Russian influence within the UK, particularly in terms of money. So in your view, Richard, why do you think the Tories haven't really pushed this much? Is it because there's too much Russian money swashing around the political elite?
Well, first of all, I'd say that the Tories are now totally out of touch with what most people in this country really want. When I look at the outpouring of help that is being given by people in Liverpool, and we're not the richest part of the country, but perhaps that's why we're not the richest. We tend to give a lot away. People who are rich tend to keep it. But there's been lorry loads of stuff going off to Wrexham, which is where stuff from the north is being collected. There's money going in, there are appeals, there are vigils. And I was very proud to be able to say at the council meeting where I seconded an emergency motion on this, that today we are meeting under the flag of the Ukraine. Unfortunately, I'd only been told that by an officer who didn't then tell me afterwards that they put it on upside down. But there we go. The spirit was there. We really fought for that. So I think the Tories are out of step with anything other than the nasty rump that they always appease. Why do they do it? I think for two reasons, personally. I think money counts, and there's been millions going into the Tory party from people who are theoretically now British citizens, but you wonder why they're British citizens and you wonder where their money comes from. But I also still think that there's this real racial nastiness amongst the Tories. Why doesn't Priti Patel want people to come in the way that her parents and grandparents did? Because they're foreigners. We don't want to have too many. We'll make all the right noises. We'll say continually, we're best of all, we're the first, we're the biggest, whatever it is, and then do bugger all behind the scenes, frankly. So I think it's money and nastiness, and the Tories can't seem to do without either of those.
And it is interesting. So as of yesterday, the UN Refugee Agency said that 1.7 million refugees have now fled the Ukraine, of which the government says they have let in, the British government says they've let in 300, which is 0.017% of the total. It's just not good. And I repeat what David said last week. It's not British.
No, it's not. And it's not going back to our roots. We are an international country. We've got what we've got by being international, not always in the right way for the right reasons. But when I look back, just to go back a long time ago, we really came to the fore during the Industrial Revolution. And that was founded on the textile workers who were Huguenots who fled from French oppression. They linked up with Scottish engineers to make mechanized looms and equipment, and that powered our empire. So even if I were to say, forget being nice people, just do things for an absolute selfishness and mercenary reasons. Mercenary reasons mean you bring the bright and the best and hope that some of them will stay in this country to help us move forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other issue that's been swirling around is about Russian money. It's about the links with donors, significant donors to a significant number of Tory MPs and organisations, culminating with obviously I've completely forgotten his name now, Lord Siberia, whatever his name is. I've forgotten his first name now. But actually, that peerage, that seems, according to the newspaper reports, that Boris Johnson ignored security advice to make sure he got entry into the UK and got an honour. it all just seems very fishy. It also, in our speed of response of the tackling this, again, why give oligarchs 30 days before you seize their assets? You can see it with Abramovich selling Chelsea, selling all his various bits and pieces to try and stop his losses. And it just, I think to most people, it smells like a cover-up, and it smells like the Tories are protecting their rich friends.
Absolutely. So first of all, there's a huge political influence, but I'm also aware, for example, of the implications for things like football. So in Liverpool, we have basically money coming from a Russian oligarch who had naming rights for the new EFC stadium, naming rights for the Everton training centre, sponsorship rights for the Everton women's team, and other things. And we all suspect that most of the money coming in to build Everton's new ground is his. So we've got Everton, we've got the owners of Manchester City. They're not Russian, but how much of the money that goes into Premier League football is coming from totalitarian regimes?
Newcastle as well, just being bought out.
There's a Chinese one somewhere. And why do they do it? Well, they're doing it to launder money and to give influence. Though it does, to be fair to the owner of Chelsea, that he does seem to be not only selling it, but giving the money to some sort of trust rather than taking it out. Or at least that's what
we'll see. We'll see. That's what they say. We'll see. Saying things and actually doing them is very different. But it is... obviously this all goes back to, and we're trying not to make this about Brexit because obviously that thing, but there was a lot of report, well, we still haven't seen the full Russia report, the unredacted report of Russian influence in our politics. And I remember at the 2019 hustings, I was with Ben Wallace, the Defence Secretary, I was up against him, and I said, why haven't you published this report? And he went, oh, there's nothing in it, don't worry about it, old chap. And I just said, well, then release it then. If there's nothing to hide, release it.
Yeah, but I think the UK has to clean up its act. I did a blog recently about whether what's happening with Ukraine and Russia will actually change the world order. Isn't it encouraging to see much more support for NATO? Isn't it encouraging to see the United States taking firm and hard action and doing it quickly? Isn't it sad to see the UK lagging behind everyone else? And is this the opportunity to get NATO going again in a more effective way, to think what NATO and the EU is standing for? Isn't it ironic that Georgia and Ukraine are joining the EU to protect their sovereignty? We left it to protect ours. Well, we can't all be right. And I suspect, of course, that it's us that's greatly out of touch on this issue.
Hello, John from the Lib Dem Podcast here. We are delighted to say that this episode is sponsored by Pray to Reigns. Now more than ever, you need a professional-looking online presence and website. Pray to Reigns have been helping Liberal Democrat campaigns succeed for 18 years. Their Lib Dem Foci package combines a website, social media and email system to help Lib Dems win. You'll receive great support from real people, fair pricing and a huge range of features to choose from. Pray to Reigns are already the bespoke developers for Lighthouse, LibDem Draw Online and the LD Directory. They combine a talented system design with an unrivaled understanding of our party, our data and our systems. To find out more, check out the Pray to Reigns website at praytoreigns.co.uk/liberal-democrats. As a consequence of this, because one of the big things that's obviously happening in tandem with this is what happens with oil and gas prices. Now, in Britain, we're quite fortunate. Only 5% of our gas comes from Russia. However, that's not the same for the rest of the EU. And actually, what the long term, and this is why sanctions on oil and gas haven't yet come forward in the degree they would. I mean, this is changing all the time. So last night, the US said something different, that they were now going to start working on it. So by the time this comes out, we realize this is a fast-moving situation. But the issue is, and it does highlight the dependence on fossil fuels too many of us and too many countries still have, and actually what this can be is a catalyst to really kickstart. Okay, why don't we have heat pumps, a massive program of heat pump installation in the UK? Why aren't we diversifying our energy network? Because I mean, it's scary, and in a short term, how we're going to cope with that. I mean, Germany's even thinking about opening up coal plants again just to do it, which is obviously a huge backward step, which because gas was seen as an intermediary. So it's better than coal. You use gas until your renewables come online. But what do we do if that is no longer available, Richard?
Well, the first thing I'd say in the UK is thank goodness for Ed Davey, because the work that he did as the DEC secretary in the coalition government has actually made us so much more independent of that outside carbon-based energy sources, the wind turbines that are flowing, the solar panels on people's roofs. So thank goodness. But unfortunately, the Lib Dems went out of office. And most of the programs got cancelled. But I think there will be a renewed impetus to this. Just as a simple example, 2 years ago, we spent our summer holiday money, which we couldn't spend on a summer holiday, and putting heat panels, 9 solar panels in. We thought that would take 7.5 years to pay off. Fortunately, we didn't have to borrow money. We think that's going to be 5 years now. So the economics for things like that are changing for everyone. So I would hope that people individually are going to start looking at these things. Just as an example, we sell electricity to the grid when we're not using it via Octopus Energy, and they were paying us £4, I think it's a therm, trying to remember my O-level physics, and now they're giving us 7.2. But everyone, well, not everyone, but lots of people could be doing that and aren't. So I don't think we've got to wait for the government. It's what you and I and everyone we know could and should be doing.
I mean, it's tandem, really. We want people who are able to, like I said, I just bought a hybrid car. That was my decision to spend a little bit extra, get a hybrid car, etc. But for people that can't do that, the government has to do better. So, for example, the government reducing a couple of years ago, reducing the energy efficiency requirements of homes as part of building regs. Completely retrograde step. There was no need to do it. We had house builders who had signed off planning permission to build houses to a certain spec. As soon as the government announced that, they then resupplied the planning permission, but with lower quality housing.
Yeah, I mean, but of course, if I remember rightly, they all did reduce the prices of those houses.
No, I bet they didn't.
No, I don't think they did either. They just made more money at a time when they were given extra inducements anyway. So in fact, when you ask the average householder how much they saved if they bought a house, the answer is nothing, because people just put the prices up to allow for the fact they are going to pay less tax on it.
That's right.
And that's always the trouble with housing incentives, which are indiscriminately given out. What we need in this country is more good quality social housing, council housing, or housing provided by the type of housing association who doesn't think they are big business, but still sees themselves as social providers. That's what we need to do for housing. And this is nothing new. 25 years ago, the housing association that I chaired had energy neutral houses. And we had to put central heating in them. We said, you won't need it, but no, you've got to have central heating in. And then they've never used it because they've never needed to. So it can be done. The technology has been there for a long time. It added 5% onto the cost of the house, which is more than recouped in over 25 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And we can't not mention what's going to happen with gas prices in the UK. So we know that the Russian invasion has already kicked up wholesale gas prices. We're seeing it at the pumps already. Now, to give people, these are rough estimates. So at the moment, we were thinking an average house price of gas before Christmas was going to be about £1,000 a year. That was roughly. Now in April, that the cap is being lifted to £2,000 a year. The cap is getting reviewed again, I think in October or November, where it is estimated it might go up to £3,000 a year, which is terrifying for people. I mean, the charity I work for, we are seeing people already terrified how are they going to pay? Because some people, they just will not be able to pay that. And the mini budget is in 2 weeks' time as we record this. Yeah. They've got to, I assume that national insurance rise has got to be stopped. I mean, there'll be so much pressure on Sunak to do something about energy prices as well, just to lessen the burden.
Yeah, I don't know that for that particular problem. I mean, I think the NI rise should be stopped. I mean, Dems believe it should be.
The NI doesn't affect gas prices. It's just taking money out of your pocket at the time when you need it.
Absolutely, I think you're absolutely right about that. But we have to find an effective way of doing it, and we should be doing far more retrofitting, for example, of properties. Not always possible in a property. Some of our pre-19 terrace houses in places like Preston and Liverpool, for example, you can't really do much to them now. They're 125, 130 years old, some of them. They are leaky in energy terms, but there are lots of houses that could be. But you're right to say, as you did before, that when we build now, we build to new modern standards, because the houses we build now, the current rate of renewal will have to last 200 years.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So we've talked about a little bit about household budgets, and obviously a part of that is obviously goes on council tax. And what any Lib Dem listening to this has done will know, if they're part of a council group, is that February has always been a chocker month, because that's when your budgets happen. So just to kind of sum up for people that don't know, there are basically three kinds of authority in England. I think this kind of is replicated in Wales and Scotland as well. But you have the lowest level, which is a parish, which if you need more information on parishes, go listen to our podcast on it. It was very good, which has a precept which it can add to raise extra money. You have then, sometimes you have two-tier authorities. So where I live, we have Lancashire, which takes about 70% of your council tax and does big ticket items, highways, health, schools, all those sorts of stuff. Whereas, and then you have a borough level, which in this case is Preston City Council, which deals with stuff like waste collection, parks, and other such things like that. Where Richard is in Liverpool, the county and the city level are combined together in what's called a unitary authority, or a unitary Met, or something like that, of which ones they're in charge of everything. Do you have parishes in Liverpool? I don't know if you do.
We could, in theory, have. So, for example, there are some in Bradford, but the old core centralised cities have very few parishes. But the situation in Scotland and Wales is quite like our system for unitaries. So all the councils there are unitaries, but they have community councils beneath them, although those have slightly different powers.
Yeah. So councils, again, rough basic history, councils only earn maybe half of what they spend through council tax. That's roughly how it goes. So, and they have to get other means from different areas, whether that's car parking charges or grants or of one form or another. And I don't think there's a single council in the UK that's flourishing with vast amount of money. Most of them have had to really save and dig deep and remove services as a kind of a final kind of way of kind of cost cutting and saving. And it's been a very difficult decision for a lot of people this year, because, I mean, I had, like I say, two different budgets to have to go through and organise and lead on. And we had to make a really tough choice about what level do you increase council tax? Because you're not allowed to do it over a certain level without doing a referendum, with the exception of parishes who can increase their precept however much they want. So it's difficult because we knew about cost of living. So, I mean, Lib Dems across the country will have had to make these choices. Councils are struggling for money versus residents that are struggling for money. Where do you pitch it? So what did you do, Richard?
Well, first of all, this may sound incredibly surprising, but I enjoyed our council meeting, because on the Monday before, 6 people quit the Labour Party, and on the day, someone else quit the Labour Party. So we went to the council meeting, and it was, going back to our earlier conversation, like being in the front line. So there were the Lib Dems at the front of the opposition benches facing Labour. And behind us were the former Labour people, because 3 had already gone, so there's in theory 10 of them, lobbing grenades right the way over our head, fighting each other. And all over the country, people have left the Labour Party over this. So we took the view that Liverpool has very special circumstances, which most people know about. We've got the commissioners in, and we've really been a very badly run council. So we did 3 things in our budget motion, none of which really changed the money. The first was to point out why it's happened. In our case, there's £135 million worth of money lost, not raised and wasted. And I would guess there are lots of authorities, particularly where Labour have been in for a long time, where you might find similar waste. The second thing we did was to point out what we should do now to regularise the situation. Because while all that money was being lost, there was a failure to invest in 2 key services for unitary authorities, or in your case, the county council, and that is children's services and adult social care, which actually mop up 70% of our budget. So people think we spend all the money on the rates and on the lights and the potholes. We don't. We spend it on a relatively small number of people, some of whom can cost £250,000 a year.
Yeah.
So we were saying this is what you've got to do to improve things in the community, where you can provide services which are better as well as being cheaper. But then, and this is something that I'm really urging on all Lib Dems, we started looking at the unfairness of the way council tax is raised. Firstly, how it's raised within our areas, because council tax is a grossly unfair tax. And that's one of the difficulties that Lib Dems have in raising it. If it was all being paid for by the people with the broader shoulders, I wouldn't be too bothered. Well, I'd be concerned, but not as bothered as I am now. But the fact is that in Liverpool, if you have a very small 2-bedroom terraced house in a poor area, you'll be paying more council tax than someone in a mansion flat in Westminster or Knightsbridge. Now, that can't be fair. So we've got to move to a better form of taxation. And then we've got to look at the way we distribute money more fairly. And the EU, who you and I both like, used to distribute money on clear statistics. How poor you are, how many people didn't have good housing, how many people didn't have a good job, how many people didn't have a good education. Whether you liked it or not, that was an assessment, and they gave you money based on that. Here, under Labour as well as the Tories, we just give money, it would appear, to our mates rather than any guarantee that it's going to meet them. So if the Lib Dems aren't going to campaign on this issue now when everyone is talking about it, when are we going to campaign on it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I made a decision within the county, because the counties have a slightly different one where you can add an extra little bit of money on for adult social services as well, and the unitaries will have that power as well. And I decided that it wasn't, given that the national insurance rise that was due to come in is supposed to pay for health and social care, I decided we would not put that in our budget statement to actually include that as a council tax rise as well. The Tories aren't stupid. The government, they know it's stupid. They know if a council puts up the council tax, the council gets blamed rather than the government. Rather, the underlying issue is the fact that they said they're raising national insurance thing to fix social care. How many times we've seen Boris Johnson say we're taking a brave choice to fix the health and social care system, and actually no, they're not. They're still allowing councils to up the amount that comes into it. So I decided that I couldn't do that, and that was a red line for me, and why I didn't support either the Greens or Labour in Lancashire. But I understand that some councils would have nearly gone to the wall if they didn't do that. Lancashire had over £200 million worth of reserves. So I know if you were ever not going to do it, this year was the year to do it.
I mean, we did have a discussion about reserves in Liverpool, where we've traditionally managed with £20 million worth of reserves. SIPFA and the commissioners have said it should go up by 30 million this year and 40 million and a further 10 million next year to 40 million. We were prepared to go along with it this year, but we've already said that we will not agree another rise in reserves. They've been saying that we had to do it in Liverpool because we have riskier accounts. And partly that's true, which is why we're prepared to see 10 million. But if we still haven't bottomed out our accounts by the time we're making a budget next year, then someone needs to go. Hopefully it'll be the Labour Party at the all-up May elections.
Absolutely. And it is interesting. This is all kind of part of a general kind of trend that, and it was on Newsnight last night, actually, that they believe that, likelihood is that Britain's going to end up in a recession again in terms of, because of the knock-on effect of the Russian invasion, on cost of living, everything is going to drive down prices, and this is going to be a very, very tough year. And that's before you factor in we've got to pay back what COVID did to the economy. We're going to have the increasing problems of Brexit hitting us. Britain is in a particularly bad situation at the moment, where we've cut off a lot of the support mechanisms we had to try and cope with these sort of things. We've now got rid of.
But it wasn't just support mechanisms, was it, John? We didn't need so much support because of the conditions for ordinary trading and ordinary civilized discourse between nations. Yeah. At some stage, we're going to have to beg for help. Now, whether we do that by trying to renegotiate some sort of deal with the EU, or whether we do it in other ways, there will be a remorseless attack on the standard of living of the vast majority of people in this country, unless a government gets elected who will do things fundamentally differently. Because these things don't necessarily cost money. Yeah. Do the right things now in terms of international trade, you just save money.
And that kind of brings on to the wider political point. We'll finish the kind of show on, because we've seen a couple of things happen. Firstly, Boris Johnson's had a little bit of a poll bump, as tends to happen when big crises happen, like what's happened in Ukraine. Tends to be a little bit of a rally around the flag, although he's still in absolute the doldrums in terms of his likability. Nigel Farage has popped up again, this time again being the wrong person at the wrong time, as always. This about wanting to ditch climate change targets, etc. And weirdly enough, there is a lot of chat about this at the moment, about will we not do, carbon neutral by 2050? Is things going to change? Is fracking going to come back? I mean, for people in Lancashire, obviously that was a massive issue, that the well not too far away from where I am now has been now finally plugged and sealed. Quadrilla have said they will not be opening that well again. But there are going to be chats. So we can go two ways in this as a country, and how we campaign as Lib Dems. We can either strive for something better or fall back into old habits. And they're the choices we've got to make.
Well, I think we've got to be bold. I think we have a good track record on the two key issues here. We've an excellent track record, as we discussed before, with what we did in terms of climate change, not talk, but actually introduce things which have really reduced our dependency on coal and imports. But we could do more and must do more. And I think people are receptive to that now. And I think we've got to be firmer about what our relationships with the EU will be. Now, you and I do have a minor difference of opinion on that, but it's a question of timing about going back in, not direction. But we've been completely let down, as have the people of the UK, by the Labour Party on this, who won't come up with a decision. I think that the party should be saying, we want to go back, and here are some intermediate steps which could be introduced quickly and easily by legislation, and which would actually make some people unemployed. The 50,000 people that we've taken on to do extra customs work, we could get them doing something productive instead. So change always brings winners and losers, but there'll be far more winners by this. So now is the time to be bold. And I think people are listening to that and understanding. There will always be a rump of really nasty people, either on the extreme left or the extreme right, who will not listen to reason. But I think the center of reasonableness has expanded. We're the people. Exploit is possibly the wrong term, but who can take advantage of that?
Absolutely. And And that leads us perfectly into what does the budgets mean for all councils. Once they are done, that is basically the starting pistol being fired for the local elections. And that is kind of, I think all of us that have been around campaigning, we all know you should knock on doors throughout the year, etc. But actually, once your budgets are done, you know what you're going to be fighting on. You know what that, and that's basically from this point onwards, really the council agendas tend to get a little bit lighter because they know you're about to hit into the campaign. So if you have elections like I do every single year, if you have elections every so often, which what happened to be this year, or if you don't have elections and are coming to help other groups, do it now, because what you have, and me and Richard have had lots of experience about this, is you tend to have a glut of leaflets wanting to go out just before election expenses and then just before the postal votes. So in the next month, probably is going to be your most leaflet and campaign heavy time. So make sure you take breaks to don't burn out, but really press that button now and get going with it. Is that right, Richard?
Absolutely. In fact, I was proudly saying till about 4 weeks ago, we haven't got any elections this year, but then we've got 2 by-elections caused by Labour resignations. One of them who resigned, I hadn't a clue that they were councillors, actually. They've made such an impact in 2.5 years. And at least one of those wards is winnable for us, but absolutely right. In fact, I was out this morning delivering my 12th visit to one of the by-election wards. And don't be swayed by people who say, oh, people don't like all these bloody leaflets. They do. Where you work, you can win. And I think your circumstances, I think, are different to mine. I'm not facing Tories, except I fight red Tories in a way in Liverpool. If I was fighting the Tories, I'd be throwing everything at these elections, because the support for the Tories is skin deep. If you look at the local council by-elections, when votes are actually cast, and people do differentiate between a national and local election, the Tories are still losing ground badly. So if you haven't got any elections, go and help those people that have, and then they'll come and help you.
And just anecdotally, from my perspective on the doors, there's you do have to worry about the Shy Tory effect, because I do actually think that is a thing. Some people who will vote Tory don't want to tell you they vote Tory. However, that doesn't seem to be happening this year. You still get people who are lifelong Tories are still going to vote Tories. They're not bad people. That's just they are, and that's where they've always voted fine. But the amount of people last year who didn't know how they were going to vote because of everything like the vaccine rollout, there was we had 4 elections on one day in one of our wards. It was a crazy election. Plus, we couldn't campaign for most of the year because of COVID. That does not seem to be happening on the doors this time, but we've got to make sure we knock on enough doors to get our vote out, because I think the Tory vote will drop significantly. I think particularly the UKIP turned Tory vote, or the Labour turned UKIP turned Tory vote, will drop. But that doesn't mean our vote is suddenly going to rise. You've got to do that work. And if you and that's the point of election time. Basically, the whole election right up to polling day is getting your vote out. That's
absolutely. And we don't have shy Tories in Liverpool. We don't have Tories at all. It's so I've often said the best thing to do is get rid of the buggers. But you're right. So it's. I think we'll have, in a way, the same effect in Liverpool. I think Labour are going to have difficulty getting their vote out for at least one of these by-elections, which is an award where one of their councillors has resigned after 2.5 years, and where one of the other councillors left the Labour Party as a councillor after just 10 months there. So are you really going to turn out and vote for them? So I think we've got strong reasons for saying vote Lib Dem this time. But remember, a lot of people vote for us, not just because we've got a label. They vote for John or Richard or Erica or Charlie or Sally because they see us there, because they see us at the shop, because we listen to them, because we talk to them, and because we try and be good members of the community. So be a community activist first. That will lead you to be a good political activist, and that will lead you to be a good councillor.
Absolutely. So with that, we will have more episodes coming up regarding the local elections and, giving advice, guidance, and some roundup of how people are doing, because people like I said, my ward is up. Hannah is up for the things. Sam is up as well. So there's lots of people here at the podcast who are right there. I was going to say in the trenches, feeling like war metaphors doesn't feel.
Yes, we ought to go off that. I didn't like the lobbing the grenade over.
That's right. It's very difficult. We have so many war metaphors that are in our language, but anyway, but we are right there. I was going to say on the front line. There's no way getting away from it.
Yeah. We shall fight in the wards. We shall fight in the streets.
Yeah.
We will never surrender.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, thank you so much, Richard, for coming on today. As always, listeners, you can comment, rate, like us at Lib Dem Pod. Do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcast from, whether that's an Android or Apple, whether it's Spotify. All these places you can listen to us. You can watch us on Facebook and YouTube if you want to see our beautiful faces in the morning or in the evening, wherever you do watch us. But thank you very much to Richard. We'll be back with more episodes very soon. Do go out there, do get campaigning. Very important that these local elections are a key test on Boris Johnson as well. We need to make sure, because there'll be seats like North Shropshire that no one else can beat the Tories except us Lib Dems, and we have to be that. We have to be that arm of that challenge. So thank you so much, Richard, and we'll be back with another episode very soon.
See you again.